Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. You know, I had something that just grabbed me today, and it's been on my mind all day long. It's been one of these things that I've gotten to this point where it's amazing how cruel people have become to each other. It's amazing to me how people who are friends are cruel to each other. And where this came out of, you know, somebody I've known for a very, very long time, someone I called a friend for a very, very long time, is not doing well. And, you know, we had a falling out, and it doesn't mean that I don't want this person to be okay and to do well and to thrive and all of this. So when he had this, I think he had a stroke and a couple other things that have gone really, really badly for him. And his girlfriend called for advice and help. I was ready to be there and to help and do whatever I could do, because that's the decent thing to do. It's how I was raised. It's the idea of helping others. You could even make the argument, I grew up in the Catholic Church. It was part of that era's Christian teachings. It was just one of those, I just liken it to being a decent person. And as we were talking, as I was talking to his girlfriend, and she was sharing with me some of the things that have happened, and, you know, some of the advice that I had given her that was helpful and useful to her, which I'm grateful for. You know, we started talking about, you know, some things around how people have been treating this person. And, you know, someone that he has been friends with for a very, very long time, evidently left a campaign button in his room of the person that he ran against a couple of times and lost badly, because it's heavily, I mean, like 75-25 Republican district, and he ran as a Democrat. He took a couple of really big public beatings. And to leave that there, you know, kind of set him back, set his progress back. He evidently not communicative now, and because when you have a stroke, I guess the way it's been explained to me is you almost revert to being a child. So it's almost like, you know, that a child turning inward, which isn't healthy. And it got me thinking today, you know, what kind of person does that? How cruel do you have to be to say you're someone's friend and then to do something like that? I mean, even if you're not friends, and look, we had a falling out. I would never have considered something like that ever in my days. And it got me thinking, because, you know, his girlfriend and I were reminiscing about the campaign and you know, about, you know, good times of the past. And it got me focused on 2016. And I'm going to point to that being a period where the country really made a hard turn. I'm not going to say a hard right turn, but a mean right turn. A mean turn towards, you know, just anger and being punitive and you know, I guess, you know, putting on the hat. You know, got the red hat, the blue hat, and we're gonna be, where politics and life became, well, life and death sport kind of thing. And I'm in this place where I was remembering to her the day of election day of 2016. And I know exactly where I was that day, because, you know, I don't talk about trauma very often, but for me, very traumatic day. I don't need therapy or anything like this. I took it in stride, but I spent the entire day opening polls to an hour before closing polls, handing out literature, trying to get people to vote for this person. And look, he's a good guy, a good person. You know, served his community, loves his community, good union guy, someone who cares about others. You know, so a lot of good things to say to people standing in line. And 2016, as everyone knows, it was a heavy voter turnout year. So as people were coming through, and I've done this over the years, where you stand at the polling place, you hand out literature because you're making that last pitch. Now understand, and I know this as well as anyone, because I've never been able to do it. I've tried. I've given it the old attaboy college try. I've never changed anybody's mind in line. I've never handed them a piece of literature and they go, "Oh, I didn't know. Well, thank you for this. I am so happy you provide this. This document changed my mind." That's never happened. But for my friend, I was willing to take the abuse. And now look, in years past, it was always kind of a jovial kind of jousting. You know, everyone knows you're that, especially in a heavily Republican district. And I'm sure it would be the same in a heavily Democratic district if you were on the other side. But there was always a healthy kind of jostling, kind of, throwing barbs back and forth at each other. A kind of a positive, I'm trying to say what I'm not going to say by because terrestrial radio rules. But we were busting each other's shoes. We used to bust each other's shoes a little bit. And that ended in 2016. And it ended in a very, very harsh way. And I was telling her the story of a guy a little bit bigger than me. Well, actually, it was a lot bigger than me. And he saw me coming, and he said, "Not a word. You don't say a word to me or I'll beat your..." And I kind of just stepped back, because he saw me kind of joking around with people or trying. And I just said, "Boo." And he looked at me, didn't know what he was going to do. And I said, "Well, that's a word." I go, is this what we're doing now? Is this who we've become? Is this what politics is for you? And I again attempted to engage with him because I'm stupid that way. And I've never been afraid of a beating. But he was having none of it, and they just walked away, which, okay. Fortunately, I didn't get a beating. But it was that moment, and this is what I was telling her. I go, it was that moment that I realized this country changed in ways that I don't think are good. When you can't talk about your differences, when you can't have conversations, when you can't bust each other's shoes a little bit, when you can't take a freaking joke every once in a while, we got problems, and really big problems. And this button, this is what set me off today. This button wasn't about joking. This button wasn't about, being jovial or, a good-natured, busting of the shoes. This was mean-spirited. This was cruel. And it's angering to me because this isn't the country that I think we should be. We should be much better than this. And what's come out of our politics, and this is the scary part for me. Because while this person and I are not friends anymore, I don't wish him ill or harm or pain or anything. I want them to be healthy and happy and move forward. We're not that country. And this is that kind of moment for me where I sat and I was thinking about this in big ways, going, how do we get back to being able to at least talk, at least have a conversation and not this is my poll, that's your poll, and the only thing we're going to do is beat each other with them. Because where we're going, and this is where I come back to all the time, is very predictable. The wealth class of this country has figured out how to slice and dice us into very, very predictable groups. You're in the red team or the blue team, or you're in the middle somewhere and well, nobody knows where you're going. But there aren't as many of those anymore. How do we undo the damage that the Trump years brought us? How do we undo that? Because look, here's the reality. Trump broke a lot of laws. Trump will be found guilty of some things. I don't think he's ever going to spend a day in jail. But as someone reminded me today, the crimes of the Bush administration are so much worse. Nobody's talking about trying that. I have a friend who sat in Congress who said, look, I would love to tell you all the things that we were shown. I would love to tell you all the things that happened, but it's sealed under me going to jail again. The Trump era brought us this kind of pushing to the limits. Trump would have never been tried for the documents had he given them back. He'd had them. He said, okay, oops, sorry, give them back. Probably wouldn't have been tried for the insurrection had he not doubled and quadrupled down. Had he just let it go, probably wouldn't have, because this is a monumental moment. And my mind went into this place again today and I don't know what it is about that damn button that is stuck in my head. The cruelty is the point. And the more that we're willing to participate and eat each other, again, the more the wealthy of this country walk away with untold profits and wealth. The more divided we are, the more we're just screwing ourselves. So it's interesting to me. And what the other part of it is under the guise of some religious zealotry. That's the other scary component of this. But I want to hear your thoughts. Am I reading too much into this? Is this button just irked me too much? I got to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Congressman Michael Cloud, a Republican of Texas, evidently told a gathering of Christians that they have been called by God himself to establish Christ's kingdom and government right here on earth. That's their job. And here's the weird thing. He gave us a little spiel about, hey, everyone raise your hand because you're in the government. And his spiel had a bit of reality for me in it. Because I do believe every person, Christian, non-Christian, every person, part of the government. That's what an active, engaged citizenry is supposed to be. It's the founding idea. It's kind of the point. And when I hear the good Christian folk like Representative Cloud, when I hear him talk about this, making Christ's kingdom right here, being part of, God's government, my mind immediately goes to the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know why. That whole spiel about, the meek shall inherit the earth, that whole thing about the poor and the downtrodden and all of that. My mind goes there. And when you have people like Congressman Cloud and other Republicans who have stood in the way of all of the social programs and all of the things that help feed people and house people and clothe people, the downtrodden, the poor. When I see them kicking those folks, I kind of go, I'm not getting it. I hear the words coming out of your mouth, but I don't see the actions coming out of your body. There's a disconnect. Seems kind of mean to me, which is why today when there was a letter sent by 25 Democratic lawmakers to Kevin McCarthy saying, hey, how about you not slash the SNAP program? How about you don't cut the nation's most important anti-poverty food program? How about we don't do that? And evidently, if Republicans don't get their pound of flesh, hungry children, evidently the farm bill might be in jeopardy is what's being said. And this is, again, one of these things where, we're just expanding work requirements. Do you think Jesus would have said, hey, I'm not going to cure the lepers because they're not going to work anyway. I'm not going to feed the hungry because, well, they're just lazy. I don't think that's how it worked. But this is who they are in action. And again, as I say, Republicans hate working people. Look at what they do, especially poor working people. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on line one. Alice, how are you?
Totally insane. How about you?
I'm a little disappointed today, a little down.
Yeah, I heard. Well, what I wanted to say was this. Trump gave the Republican Party and their base and the evangelicals the courage to come out and show they're ugly.
Yeah.
He did. And, it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle once you've set it free. And, they're already living in an alternative universe out there. Like last week you were talking about that, The Sound of Freedom, that movie. Well, I've researched this, and that movie was loosely based on events. In the original thing, the guy originally was just tracking down a brother and sister. But they took as the one of the where they one of the reviews said literary license.
Yeah.
They took literary license and creative license.
Theatric liberties.
What they did was they took and they made it a right-wing wish, is what they did, and it's very hard to deal with that. And they do it to everything.
Yeah.
Look what they're doing. They did to their religion. All of a sudden it's like we believe in Jesus, even though we don't follow nothing that's in that big book which we keep trying to shove down your throat. Like I said to the neighbor the other day, look, do you really think when you die that God or Jesus is going to sit there and ask you how come you didn't stop the gay person or the person having the abortion? No, they're going to ask you about you, what you did or did not do. But you have a good evening, Rick.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. No, at the end of it, look, I want to live in that world that Michael Cloud Representative Cloud talks about, where citizens care about each other, whether we create a government of active, engaged citizens. I do, who believe in the ideals of community and caring and all of that stuff. Kind of, I think that'd be great. Probably never going to happen, as long as you've got greed and all of that in the way. But hey, we can try. I got an email I got to get to. Bernard from Wisconsin sent me an email, and I've been chewing on this one for a couple of days. He said, I heard you talk about Medicare Advantage plans. Now understand, I think Bernard actually works for an insurer that does these plans, because there's a lot in here that seems a little drippy, a little too praising. But he writes, I heard you talk about Medicare Advantage plans recently and the fact that privatization of Medicare will be a horrible thing. I agree with that. Are you afraid of competition? There is a reason Medicare Advantage is now being sought after by the majority, and that is because Medicare has outlived its usefulness. People understand that Medicare is the real waste, not the Advantage plans that pay for prescription drug coverage, dental, vision, and hearing. They offer coordinated care, transportation to doctors' offices, and even grab bars for people's home bathrooms. Medicare does none of that. Bet you won't respond or use this on air. Well, Bernard, bet I will. I did respond, and I will use this on air because these are talking points. These are the Advantage people's talking points. And first and foremost, let's start with the fact that it's now reached a breaking point of more than half of the people on Medicare or using Medicare money are using a privatized version. And the reason for that, for me, is very simple. Have you seen the advertising blitz that has gone on over the last couple of years? Have you seen the amount of your tax dollars that are going into television, into radio, into print, into every type of social media to get people to go, hey, gym memberships. Hey, because you forgot that, Bernard, gym memberships. They give those too. Tennis shoes and sunglasses to go for your gym membership. All kinds of stuff. There are lots of sweeteners and lots of shiny things. And the question that I got to ask is, and that's secondly, how do you think that they can do all of these things that you laid out and Medicare can't? Why is it that these privatized plans can do the things that Medicare cannot? Because if you remember, there was a big fight over getting hearing, dental, and vision just not too long ago. You may remember it. Democrats were pushing really hard to get that into Medicare. And who fought that, Bernard? Oh, yeah, the Republicans. Tooth and nail. Now you go, it's because, well, they're in the pockets of the insurers. And that's probably true. But it's their ideology to destroy what is public and make it private. And Bernard, as I wrote you, please tell me one thing that privatization has made better. Tell me one thing. Did it make Chicago's parking authority better, or Harrisburg, or Pittsburgh, or any of the parking authorities across this country that have been privatized and privatized? Has it made that better or cheaper? No. How about the turnpikes that were sold off? How about our for-profit prisons? How about name just about water, sewer authorities? How about just about anything that we, the people, used to do for ourselves? How about anything that we used to do that we said, no, corporations can do it better, more efficient, cheaper, be a better service. Just show me one thing that has led up and turned into what we were sold. Because we were sold, corporations were going to be much more efficient. We were going to get a better product at a cheaper price because of this wonderful magic of competition. And I've been asking this, and Bernard, this is not fair to you, because I've been asking this question for 18 years now, and no one has come up with a reasonable response. It's just what we believe. And, well, what you believe is we're getting screwed at every opportunity. And the frustrating part in this is what's angering to me is what we used to do for ourselves, we've now got to put a profit motive in front of, where we've got to have corporate America who's well-fed and well-profitized. And even when we do try and claw back some, for instance, Medicare cannot negotiate for prescription drugs. Thank you, George W. Bush. Thank you, Republicans. So now you got Joe Biden going, hey, maybe on a couple of these drugs we should do this. And what happens? Well, all of Big Pharma, Bristol Myers Squibb, all of them, the Chamber of Commerce, all of them, Merck, all of them now are suing the government because their First and Fifth Amendment rights are being violated, they say. What actually it is, it's the $25 billion that Medicare might save that they're really suing for. It's not their free speech or their right against self-incrimination. It had nothing to do with that. It's about the money. And anytime you hear privatization, anytime you go, hey, there's this shiny thing over here, be very, very afraid, because they come back to, how do they do all those wonderful things on the same dollar that Medicare uses? How do they do that? They do it by denying you care. Maybe look into that, Bernard. Thanks for the email. You got a question, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1978. That was the day President Jimmy Carter declared a federal health emergency at Love Canal in the city of Niagara Falls, New York. Premier spokeswoman, housewife Lois Gibbs, became the poster child for the citizens' environmental justice movement virtually overnight. Niagara Falls Gazette journalists had broken the story 2 years earlier. Residential sump pump testings and health surveys found a number of toxic chemicals and unusually high rates of cancers, birth defects, miscarriages, and other serious health concerns. Initially planned as a canal, the site remained abandoned until the 1940s. That's when Hooker Electrochemical Plant and the city began using the site to dispose of toxic chemicals and municipal waste. More than 20,000 tons of toxic sludge containing more than 21,000 chemicals were buried there. Then, in 1953, the city school board bought the site and built 2 schools on the property. Soon, about 1,000 families settled nearby. By the early 1970s, residents complained of foul odors, health issues, substances filling their basements, and leaky waste disposal drums popping up in their backyards, killing all plant life. Carter's initial declaration provided limited funding, but the disaster led to the passage of the Superfund Act. The neighborhood was demolished and residents were compensated and relocated. The new owner of Hooker Chemical, Occidental Petroleum, settled with the EPA for $129 million. Despite 21 years of remediation and residential redevelopment, new residents complained in 2011 of foul odors and ruptured sewer lines oozing toxic sludge. By 2014, 1,000 new complaints had been filed, contending the area had never been properly remediated. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
How about a little bit of good news for a change? Specifically, good news about news. The demise of local newspapers has been a very depressing story in the last few years, with several thousand of them gobbled up by Wall Street profiteers. Those money powers loot the publication's assets, then callously shut down each community's paper or reduces them to empty news shells. So that's that. Local print journalism is passé, right? Wrong. High-spirited, community-minded subscribers in places like Glen Rose, Texas, Hamburg, Iowa, Portland, Maine, and International Falls, Minnesota, are humming an upbeat tune of regeneration that could be titled, "Not Dead Yet." In Maine, for example, 5 of the state's 6 daily papers and 17 weeklies were sinking under the ownership of an investment group. But all were recently bought by the National Trust for Local News, a nonprofit started 2 years ago. The trust is turning each publication over to local nonprofit owners and helping them find ways to become sustainable. Another new effort called Cherry Road Media has bought 77 rural papers in 17 states, most from the predatory Gannett conglomerate that wanted to dump them. Cherry Road's business plan is simple, old-time genius. Return editorial decision-making to local people and journalists who know the town. Be an active presence and participant in community affairs. Make the locals responsible for sustaining their town's paper and, most important, reinvest profits in real local journalism that advances democracy. This is Jim Hightower saying, in both of these new initiatives, the foremost mission is to serve the common good of the communities, not to pad the wealth of a few distant financiers. To learn more about these models and how you might implement something similar in your town, contact Institute for Rural Journalism, ruraljournalism.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, we had David Pepper on not too long ago, and we were talking about his book, Laboratories of Autocracy. The states. And one of the states that I've been paying attention to, one of the laboratories of autocracy, state of Iowa. Iowa has lost its freaking mind on alum, and it's kind of been the petri dish of really bad ideas that are being spread everywhere else. But, for me, I remember, because I got to tell you, Senator Harkin was one of my favorite people in the Senate. And to see that state go from a solid moderate Democratic state to, wow, what we see now, quite disturbing. And that's why I've asked our good friend Sammy Sheets to come talk with us. Sammy's an Iowa state representative, one of our frontline guys in pointing out all of the horrible. Sammy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So I'm looking at Iowa again. I guess you got an abortion ban now, huh?
Yeah, we do. The Republican Party decided to pull us all back after the legislative session, spend tens of thousands of dollars to pay legislators to come back from across the state to basically ban abortion in the state of Iowa. It's technically a 6-week fetal heartbeat bill, but as we know, 98% of abortions are not found within the first 6 weeks of pregnancy. In the Republican Party, despite overwhelming majority of Iowans, our gold standard of polling is Ann Seltzer in the Des Moines Register Iowa poll, found that almost 70% of Iowans, 61%, support protecting reproductive rights in almost all cases. And it goes even higher. 70% of women support that as well. But the Republicans, per usual, are putting in place policies that go against the interest of Iowans. And they're taking back a right that women have had in the state for over 50 years. And I think and I hope that Iowans will make them pay a political price for doing so, for taking away freedoms and rights instead of ensuring them and enshrining them like so many other states across the country are doing right now.
Yeah. Now, my problem with all of this is I hear a lot of these people talk about being pro-life. We're pro-life. We're pro-life. Exactly how many bills have your Republican friends who are now forcing this on women in your state? How many of them have brought forth bills? Oh, I don't know, to make sure that when those children are born, they get health care, that they get a good education, that they get fed. How many of those pieces of legislation are to help especially poor and working class mothers be able to afford child care? How many of those bills are banging around in your house right now on the Republican side?
Absolutely zero. And they've done the exact opposite. And it's such hypocrisy because the Republican Party, this legislative session, this year, passed a bill to kick tens of thousands of children off of their SNAP benefits and almost 1,000 children off of their health care. So when they talk about being pro-life and try and enshrine themselves in their party and pro-life language, it's complete BS.
Well, the good
They
thing
have Go ahead.
the good thing, Sammy, is that they did pass that child labor bill, so those kids can pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Because the meatpacking plants, they always need people to clean up on the kill floor.
Yeah. So the Republicans have decided as well during this past legislative session that instead of paying workers that should be working a livable wage, instead of paying them what they deserve, giving them respect, instead of reinstating what used to be our gold standard of collective bargaining agreements in the state of Iowa, hey, let's solve the Republican created workforce crisis by putting children back into the workforce. That's the Republican solution to a problem that they created. And it's putting children in danger across the state. And we're already seeing the repercussions. And we also have now children 16 and 17 that are serving alcohol across the state of Iowa. And nothing's, safer than having 16 and 17-year-old girls serving alcohol to adults,
Yeah,
right?
no, the other part of this is when I first heard that, I'm going, wait a second, let me think about this for a minute. I remember being 16.
Yep.
I remember being 16. And I think we all remember being 16. If you would have given me the ability to serve alcohol to my friends or, to myself, do you think I would have not taken that advantage? Do you think I would have not done that? And this is where, again, it's like we're setting people up for failure and knowing, I don't know, it's really twisted to me what I'm seeing happening in your state.
Not just failure, we're putting them in danger. That's fundamentally what this is doing. It's putting children in danger. And it's because Republicans and their corporate donors are unwilling to pay people a living wage and give them respect. That's fundamentally what it is. The workforce crisis that we're seeing in Iowa is because of that. We have the lowest minimum wage, and we're surrounded by states, many states, that are even more conservative than us. But business interests continue to argue against raising the minimum wage. That's still $7.25 an hour in the state of Iowa. Jeez. That's not a living wage. That's a starvation. That's a starvation wage.
And the other part of this is what I didn't bring up, because you went there first, having 16-year-old girls and boys too, serving alcohol in those kind of places. We hear our Republican friends talk about groomers and pedophiles a lot. In fact, an awful lot. It's almost like that's all that's on their minds. It seems to me that putting young people in that situation only makes that kind of outcome more likely, more possible, and maybe something we should, I don't know, maybe not do.
Yeah, look, fundamentally, this bill this legislation, this law, now that the governor signed it, is going to put children in our state in danger, and that's fundamentally wrong. They're putting corporate interests over our children, in so many different ways in our state.
Now, here's the thing, Sammy, and this is where my mind kind of goes into this place of, I'm starting to believe that the Republican Party knows that their days are numbered, and because they're doing a lot of this really extreme stuff that corporations and extremists want. They seem to be doing it very quickly and in a very coordinated effort. Because I look at Ohio, on Tuesday in Ohio, they're gonna try and ram through a law to make amending the Constitution even more difficult than it already is, because they know they've got to hold on to that to hold on to power. How much of this do you think is in that world, that they see their days potentially numbered? Because you said a moment ago, you hope there's a bloodbath at the polls when people go and send these people packing. I'm curious your thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because Republicans, I thought for a long time, were very disciplined in terms of not over, they thought very strategically in the long term. But for whatever reason, in the last couple of years, it might be the Trump effect, it might be other things. The way that they legislated this session, I can really only speak to Iowa, is that they thought that they could pass whatever and not face any political consequences, even when the policies that they advocated for were completely out of step with what Iowans want. They passed $1 billion voucher scheme that's going to take our public tax dollars and hand it out to rich kids to go to private school. And we already talked about the abortion ban that the vast majority of Iowans oppose. Their legislation and their policies completely go against what the people of Iowa want and need. And so my hope is that Iowans are going to actually hold them accountable at the polls next year.
Yeah, I mean, there's for me, the child labor thing is huge. And we had a listener, call in and say, hey, look, in Chicago, you can't get a minor to ring up alcohol at the grocery store, or tobacco for that matter. And now you're going to have kids serving it in bars. It's lunacy, and it seems like the want for trouble. And I go back to this. These are the folks who tell us that they're pro-life, and I can't find where that is.
They're not. They're fundamentally not. They want to take away rights from people, and then if a child is born, like I can go on and on about in the state of Iowa, they've privatized our Medicaid over the past couple of years, which is disproportionately affecting kids with disabilities and who are in poverty. We've talked about the SNAP benefits, that now tens of thousands of children are going hungry as a result of Republican policies. They're not worried about being pro-life. They're worried about catering to a small sliver of their base and to special interests. And that's what the abortion ban, that's what a voucher scheme that's $1 billion that's going to defund our public education system, which 95% of kids in Iowa use. Tell me that's pro-life.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Iowa State Representative Sammy Sheets. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So, again, I come back to this moment. I think we're in a moment in this country where we've got to decide what our identity is. I thought we had solved this 100 years ago. I thought we had on the child labor front. My hope is that seeing how extreme Republicans have gotten, and very quickly. I mean, understand, all of this stuff has been banging around in their think tanks for years. The right pays smart people a lot of money to come up with bad ideas. And now they've got a legislature, not just in Iowa, but across the country in a number of places, that are willing to move on these bad ideas. What's it going to take? I traveled across Iowa. We talked to people. When you talk to them one-on-one, I get a sense that, we're all in the same place. But when you start putting them in groups and you start putting, hats on them, red hat, blue hat, things get really crazy. How do you see a way forward?
So I've talked to you about this before. I really fundamentally think we can whine about what Republicans do, whether they just how they campaign on falsehoods, etc. I mean, they ran in Iowa, for instance, on inflation and economic responsibility for a couple of years, and then spent the entire legislative session kicking poor people while they were down, and attacking LGBTQ youth, etc., etc. We as Democrats can only control what we can control, and that's our messaging. That's how we talk to voters. That's how we connect with voters. And I've said this before, and I'll say it 100 times again. We have to rebuild the Democratic Party as a workers' party and a party for the working class of this country. Iowa's a place that has 2/3 of its population that didn't go to college or university. 66% of the state is a non-college educated. It's mostly white. That's reflective of a lot of the upper Midwest and places like where you're from, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin. And we desperately need to reconnect with working class people. So I think our messaging has to be on what can Democrats do to materially improve your lives, whether that's better schools, that's better benefits, that's making sure that kids don't go hungry in our state, that's more, improved access to health care. It's so many things that government can do, and instead Republicans are using our state resources to give away tax credits to billionaires, to large corporations. Democrats are the people that fight for working people. We're on their side, and Republicans use all their political capital and energy to serve their political donors.
Yeah, and
This is not a process. This is not a process that's going to happen overnight. It's hard to rebuild a brand and trust, but the working people of Iowa are suffering every single day that Republicans are in power. So it's not about when or how it's not about when, it's about how we get this done, because it
no,
has to.
absolutely. I'm 100% with you. And one of the things that I rail against is privatization. You talked about the privatization of Medicaid, and that I had an email just recently about the privatization of Medicare, and this person Bernard from Wisconsin was all down the hey, we get gym memberships and sunglasses, and they give us mugs and all kinds of sweeteners. The care that we get probably going to be not the same, but hey, we get shiny stuff. And I argue privatization is one of the central issues that Democrats have to run against.
Absolutely. And I think, I haven't mentioned yet, we have to put this in context here on a national show. These policies are not, just randomly created or propagated by a random state legislator who had a bright idea. This is a national movement from the far right to enact these policies in as many states as possible. Iowa, unfortunately, is being swarmed right now by right-wing political candidates for the Republican nomination for president. And so we hear over and over every day when we wake up and read the paper, watch TV, about just how radical some of the people in the Republican Party are, and some of the top people that are running for office, whether it's national 6-week abortion bans, whether it's gutting, workers' rights even further than the Republicans have done so far. So many of the bills that we saw in Iowa can be traced directly to places like Florida, to Alabama, to Arkansas, places like that where right-wing interest groups have basically taken on a national playbook. And to your point, they're very successful at it. They have tons of money, and they do a good job of enacting these policies despite the will of the people in so many of these states.
No, as I just said, they spend a lot of money, hire a lot of really smart people to come up with really bad ideas. And look, it's not just, as you said, it's a national strategy. And I come back to, I fear we're kind of in the last throes of the Republican Party. And I think there's part of me that thinks they know it. I don't know what that looks like when Trumpism and the MAGA stuff explodes into what's next. And that's one of the things I've been worried about, because Trump is so far. Where does the next guy take it? I mean, do we have someone who comes all out and finally says out loud, and a party who advocates we should do nothing for the commons? The government should do nothing. We should privatize everything, including our government. Basically making us a fascist country.
Yeah, but the problem with Trump is that he's been very skillful at telling working class people that his policies and his rhetoric are what they need to improve their lives. And obviously, it has a little bit of an extra racist tinge to it when he also says that Muslims and immigrants are the reason that your wages are declining, that your town is shut down because of deindustrialization, not that because multinational corporations and terrible free trade deals have caused tens of thousands, if not millions of workers in manufacturing to lose their jobs. He blames it on immigrants and minorities, because that's the easier political thing to do, is to instill fear into people. But I mean, long term, I can, really only speak to what's happening in Iowa. I don't see a way where the Republican Party does not have political consequences for taking away rights from half of the people in the state, from gutting our public education system. We care about public education, love public education so much in Iowa. We put it on our damn state coin. And people have known for decades about how good our public education system is. And so when you come and strip away the foundation of what our state has been for decades, generations, they're going to pay a price for it politically.
That's the hope, unless they come up with some of the legislation we've been seeing banging around in other states to limit people's ability to vote, putting roadblocks in front of people being able to vote. Just throwing them off the rolls because, hey, that postcard we mailed you, 16 weeks ago, you didn't respond to. Sorry, I know it looked like junk mail, but, hey, better luck next time.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy times we live in, Sammy, but it's a good thing we got folks like you on the beat doing the good work. I appreciate your time and the stuff you're doing. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Rick.
Again, I hate hearing this stuff coming from Iowa. I hate hearing it coming from anywhere, but especially there. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1890. That was the day that one of the heroines of the U.S. labor movement, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, was born in Concord, New Hampshire. Elizabeth learned her progressive politics at a young age. Her father was a socialist and her mother a feminist. Elizabeth was kicked out of high school for speaking out in favor of socialism. This did not slow her down. She kept speaking and her reputation grew. She became a member of the Industrial Workers of the World. She traveled the country organizing and speaking to workers. From the Minnesota Iron Range to the textile mills of Lawrence, Massachusetts, Elizabeth was on the front lines of the labor struggle. She was arrested for her activity 10 times, but was never sentenced. During World War I, Flynn was arrested and stood trial for speaking out against the war. The experience led her to become one of the founders of the American Civil Liberties Union, an organization dedicated to protecting freedom of speech. In the 1930s, Flynn became a member of the U.S. Communist Party, writing a regular column for the Daily Worker. But despite her personal political ideas, she supported Democratic Party President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1944. During the 1950s, she was caught up in the anti-communist hysteria led by Senator Joe McCarthy. She went to prison for 2 years for allegedly violating the Smith Act, a law against overthrowing the government. She died while on a visit to Russia in 1964. More than 20,000 people attended her funeral there. A monument to Flynn stands at the Forest Home Cemetery just outside of Chicago, where she is buried alongside the graves of Eugene Dennis, Big Bill Haywood, and the Haymarket Martyrs. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Well, that's weird. It's rare that when I listen to it's rare that I listen to the commercial breaks. But one of our labor history in twos just talked about Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, and she was a feminist labor activist. From she was born in 1890. She during the World War I, World War II era, she was an activist. She was known as the Rebel Girl because she gave these incredibly fiery speeches. She was the founder of the American Civil Liberties Union. She advocated for women being able to vote. But evidently, she joined the Communist Party in 1936. Was sent to jail in 1951. She died at the age of 74. And this is one of those weird moments. Today, the story broke. Now, she's been dead since 1964. Evidently, they just put up a marker in her honor in the place where she was born. And the state of New Hampshire just took it down. I guess it's been up since May 1st. They took it down. They're now being, now the state of New Hampshire is being sued because they took this marker down. And I got to tell you, this is one of those, I was expecting this kind of stuff because, the right feels that they're being mistreated because we're taking down the traitors and the Confederate monuments. They took down Robert E. Lee. We're going to go after Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. Yeah, it is what it is. It was evidently one of more than 275 across the state that described the people and the places from from Revolutionary War soldiers to sports figures, any notable. But it was taken down after just a couple of weeks, and this is where they're suing. But it's incredible to me that again gonna push, and for me it's about history. If you're going to have that kind of wide breadth of people to have these monuments for, I don't know. Now look, the Robert E. Lee ones and those, there should be a place for those. I didn't say destroy them. I said they shouldn't be government supported. They shouldn't be put in places that are in the public square. I think we should have them in places where history is learned. And this is the same kind of thing. I think we should know the history of this country. Just my thoughts. Want to hear yours? Email me at rick@thericksmithshow.com. So evidently the pandemic is officially over. No, I don't believe that. In fact, my producer he just actually right now going through the COVID again. And but I say it's over because Zoom evidently is telling all the people, okay, time to come back to work, time to come back to the workplace, time to bring yourself back into the office. No more working over Zoom. And this is one of these things I go, the messaging out of this for me is remarkable. No more working over Zoom. Sorry. What do you think's going to happen when the messaging is the Zoom employees have to go back to work? The Zoom employees can no longer Zoom into work. What's that going to say for everyone else? And I got to wonder what's going to happen to Zoom stock down the road as we no longer, Zoom. Just a thought. They said in January of 2022, Zoom had only 2% of its employees on site. Wow. Evidently, the company employs more than 8,400 people worldwide. That's a lot of people. That is a lot of people. Now, FedEx evidently is laying off a bunch of people, and this was sent to me by a listener who said, "Is this automation?" And I'm going to argue partially, maybe, but for right now, this is just this is now just the layoff in the York area that I was sent the story of, because evidently here in York, Pennsylvania, they're laying off 220 people. In Texas, they're laying off a bunch of people. In other places, they're laying folks off. Part of it is potentially moving towards automation. I don't think we're going to get hit with a slew of that right away. I think that's coming. But this particular one is even more outrageous to me than automation. This is FedEx going, you know what? We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to hire a third-party logistics provider to come and do this. We're going to have someone else do it so that these aren't actually our employees. These are someone else's problem. We're just getting our work done. And, I got to wonder, because I've been asking around and I don't know yet, but I got to wonder how much of this is possibly a union drive, where there was some rumor that, hey, there's some union activity going on. Let's just get rid of those workers and bring in a third-party logistics company that we can cut off anytime. Basically taking the FedEx model to the next level. Yeah, frightening, scary stuff. But I appreciate the thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program or any of our programs, you can grab the podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You'll find ours, or just go to thericksmithshow.com. It's all right there for your convenience. Make sure you share with your friends, family, coworkers, even people you don't like. They got to hear good news too. Right back. Stick around.
Climate change shifted the heat.
Man-made climate change made record hot July 3 times more likely, new study finds.
That can lead to over 2 billion hours of labor lost per year just in the United States.
Extreme heat is also extremely costly for business. Plus,
customers are facing another rate increase. It's the third this year.
America's first new nuclear reactor in years finally starts operations in Georgia with higher costs for ratepayers.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
A new reactor at a new nuclear power plant in Georgia is now producing energy that could soon be used to power your home. It's an exciting step.
Not the words that I would use to describe it. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as delighted as I am about a new nuclear reactor in Georgia, I guess we have to start with the nuclear reactor in the sky that is causing all kinds of problems across this earth.
Sure, we can put it that way. About 80% of humanity experienced unusually hot temperatures during July. That was the hottest month in recorded history, and human-caused climate change was responsible for most of it. That's according to a new study by nonprofit data firm Climate Central. The researchers say more than 6.5 billion people experienced climate change intensive extreme heat in July 2023, and man-made global warming made those extreme temperatures at least 3 times more likely.
And they are still experiencing that heat right now.
Indeed. Even though it is winter in the southern hemisphere, parts of Chile hit a record 102 degrees this week.
102 degrees Fahrenheit in winter?
Yes. Beijing became the newest area deluged by record-breaking rainfall, the remnants of Super Typhoon Doksuri, one of the most intense storms ever to hit China, dumped nearly 2.5 feet of rain over 5 days in the Beijing region, an all-time high in at least 140 years of record-keeping. That triggered catastrophic flooding, crippling the city, killing at least 21 people, with dozens still missing. Climate scientists say global warming is turbocharging extreme rains around the world because a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. Extreme weather is extremely expensive, according to a new assessment by global reinsurance giant Munich Re. In just the first half of 2023, globally, disasters of all kinds caused more than $110 billion in economic losses. But the U.S. alone makes up more than a third of those disaster losses this year so far. A different study finds that the prolonged extreme heat has hit small business owners exceptionally hard. According to a new report by the small business payroll company Homebase, the heat forced many small businesses to close early in July due to fewer customers and to protect employees. That reduced paid working hours for employees. The company warned that extended dangerous temperatures may reshape consumer behavior.
Wow, that would be something that a political party that cares about small businesses would want to take action and do something about, right?
We can now add oil refineries to the list of fossil fuel infrastructure struggling amid record-shattering heat. Refineries in Texas and Louisiana have been forced to cut back operations as a safety measure because they're not designed to operate above 95 degrees. That has helped spike gas prices around the world. They've reached their highest levels this year so far in the United States.
So fossil fuels increase the heat. That shuts down the refineries, which raises the profits for the fossil fuel companies.
Pretty neat, huh?
Sweet deal.
In other news, the Biden administration held an oil lease auction as required by law, this time in Nevada, but nobody came. 0 oil companies bid in the Bureau of Land Management's lease sale. The bust underscored calls from conservationists to focus on abundant renewable energy in the state and phase out oil production. Finally, electric utility Georgia Power began commercial operation at one of 2 large new nuclear reactors at the Vogel plant this week after years of delays, design and construction missteps, and massive cost overruns. The first newly built U.S. reactor to come online in decades. It was supposed to be up and running in 2016, but the cost of the reactors has more than doubled to more than $30 billion. While the new reactor will generate zero emissions electricity for for an estimated 500,000 homes and businesses, Georgia Power has asked for the third rate increase in a year on customers to pay for the cost overruns of Plant Vogtle.
So, more dangerous and more expensive.
Yeah.
The plan is sound. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Mastodons, and website formerly known as Twitter at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the AFL-CIO just released their executive pay watch report, which they do every year. And again, it's one of these things that tells us just how bad working people in this country are getting screwed over. Used to be when my grandparents, and I talk about this all the time, when my grandparents' generation ruled the roost and they were in the middle of their working lives, the CEO to worker pay was somewhere 20 to 30 to 1. We're well beyond that. And here to tell us who the highest paid CEOs, who are greedy folks at the top are, I've asked Brendan Reese to come talk with us. Brendan is the Deputy Director of Corporations and Capital Markets for the AFL-CIO. You can check out their website on this report at paywatch.org. Brendan, thanks for taking time for us.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Thank you for having me on your show.
So just how bad is this report? Every year I see this 200, 300, 400 times what the average worker makes. How bad is it this year?
Yeah. So in 2022, CEOs of S&P 500 index companies received on average $16.7 million in total compensation. And that's a $5 million increase over the past 10 years. On average, a $500,000 pay increase each year. I mean, that's almost an impossible amount of money to imagine. In contrast, real hourly wages, as measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, fell 1.6% after inflation. The average S&P 500 CEO made 272 times what their median employee made. So it would take an employee of one of those companies over 6 lifetimes to earn what their CEO earned just last year.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible to me. And I was looking at some of the numbers, and, some of the numbers that grabbed my attention, because I always like to find a favorite. Like I have a favorite billionaire, Stephen Schatz Biscotti, made his money the old-fashioned way, outsourcing jobs. But in this one, Live Nation CEO Michael Rapino, he's now my favorite. $139 million. This guy made in 2022, according to your report, charging me excess fees on tickets. So every time I go to take my kids to a concert and the price of the ticket's $50 and I got to pay $40 in fees, I know that I'm helping Michael Rapino. Maybe we can get him to $140 million next year.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Live Nation Entertainment had the highest CEO to worker pay ratio in the S&P 500 last year at over 5,000 to 1. And Live Nation Entertainment also, they're the ones who brought us dynamic pricing algorithms for the purchasing of concert tickets and sporting events tickets, and using AI to extract every last bit of value from our pocketbooks. So these CEO to worker pay ratios, they matter because they're contributing to economic inequality, right, and an imbalance in our economy. When workers see that the CEO is receiving the lion's share of compensation, it sends a negative message to the rest of the workforce. And in contrast, companies with low pay ratios, those are the companies that are more likely to be investing in their employees and creating good paying jobs. So our PayWatch website, it features a database of CEO pay for all publicly traded companies, as well as the company specific pay ratios when they're disclosed. We also have a map that you can look up how CEOs whose companies are headquartered in your state, how much they made compared to the average worker in your state. And so this information is really important for people to understand the role of CEO pay in fueling economic inequality and imbalancing our economy, right? We have a choice. We can choose between an economy where companies, grow jobs and invest in their workforce, or a winner-take-all system in which CEOs are reaping all the rewards and the rest of us are asked to do more with less, as has been the case over the past several decades, as you rightly pointed out at the beginning of this interview, that historically pay ratios between CEOs and the rest of the workforce were not outrageous at 200-300 times average worker pay. After World War II, going up to about the 1980s, the average ratios were 20, 30, topping out at 40 times back in the early 1980s, and now we're well higher of that with the type of pay increases that we've been seeing really accruing to the CEO class in the past several decades.
Well, I would argue that and you can correct me if you think you're wrong, if I'm wrong, and I don't think you will, but I would argue that, when my grandparents were in the workforce, you think the 50s, 60s, 70s, union density was like 35% in this country. You couldn't trip over a worker without finding a union member. Today, with that number in the private sector being, 6.5, under 7, CEOs feel kind of emboldened that they don't worry about having to deal with organized workers, because there aren't as many of us as there were back when my grandparents were fighting this stuff.
That's right. Working people, we need to have the freedom to negotiate for fair wages and benefits, and CEOs are not just going to give it to us, even when that might be in the best interest of the company over the long term, right? Investing in your workforce, having a productive and motivated employee base is critical to the long-term success of companies. But CEOs are not in it for the long term. They're looking at quarter-to-quarter stock price performance. They're looking about how they can cut corners now to boost their pay, and even if that comes to the detriment of our economy as a whole, by making working people's jobs less secure and more demanding and stressful, including through the use of AI technology.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Brendan Reese. He's the Deputy Director of Corporations and Capital Markets for the AFL-CIO. You can check out their website on this Executive Pay Watch report over at paywatch.org. We'll get links over on social media. I can take a look at that. This year, I noticed there's a caveat, and you've got AI-fueled CEO pay. CEOs are rushing to incorporate artificial intelligence into their business. So as bad as this is now, and it's bad, I think the response here is it's going to get worse, and it's going to get a lot worse, and I fear more quickly than most working people understand. Absolutely.
So we looked at the highest paid CEOs from last year, the $100 million CEOs who topped the ranking. And they are all rushing to incorporate artificial intelligence into their businesses. And right now we face a choice in how this new technology is going to be used. Artificial intelligence has the power to make us more productive in our jobs, but it can be also used in ways that undermine the quality of our jobs and even eliminate them altogether. In some industries, artificial intelligence is already making HR decisions about hiring, scheduling, the assignment of tasks, performance reviews, and even terminations are being handled by artificial intelligence. We as working people must have a voice in how this new technology is being deployed into the workplace. And the best way to do that is through a union. And that's exactly what's going on right now with the strike in Hollywood by performers and writers. They're striking against the major television and motion picture producers over how artificial intelligence will be used in their industry today. Performers are worried about the use of what's called deep fake generative AI technology to create entirely synthetic performances. Imagine actors being forced as a condition to work to sign away their rights to their own image so that AI can recreate their performances without compensating those actors in the future.
or taking away any intellectual property whatsoever, thus making AI perfectly legal to be used in the public space as well. Which, again, as I've been saying about these strikes, this is the front war. This is the front line of the class war. This is the front line of this AI war. Because, you know, if they lose this, it will filter down to everyone else. And me, as someone who, you know, I've been a truck driver for 30 years. I know that we're on the chopping block as well. As soon as automation comes online, you can kiss millions of jobs goodbye because they will be replaced with machines that will never stop. And this is one of those things I keep telling my non-union trucking buddies. Hey, this is the reason you organize into a union, because that ABF contract that was just signed, there's language in there that says no automation for the next 5 years. You got to be able to sit down and negotiate this stuff, which is why people should be signing contracts and joining and forming unions quickly.
That's right. The fight that the entertainment industry workers are having right now, that's our fight. It's about keeping the humanity in our jobs and making sure that we have a voice in how these new technologies are being used. And you're absolutely right. It's not just entertainment industry workers. It's not just white collar workers. And we're seeing artificial intelligence being used at fast food drive-ins to take orders. We're seeing artificial intelligence used in Amazon warehouses to assign tasks and to structure the pace of work through digital management of the workforce in ways that are increasing stress for people who still have their jobs, but are now reporting to an algorithm versus a human being.
No, we're in scary times. And here's my problem with this, Brandon. I don't, and look, you're a DC guy. I know the AFL is working on all this stuff, and maybe there's something I'm not seeing, but I'm not seeing a legislative path to helping in any of this. I'm not seeing our government anywhere near. Look, I've been calling for people to get ahead of this for years. I've been calling for a technology tax for 10 years now to slow down the rate of automation, the rate of AI taking over jobs. I've been saying this for the last decade. Hey, we need to get out of this, if nothing, at least on the tax front, to make people whole. Is there anything that you can point to that's going on in DC where, you know, there maybe someone's working on this to say, hey, maybe we need to slow this down, take a minute, take a breath?
Yeah, so President Biden and the White House have issued an AI Bill of Rights to try to flesh out what type of protections we need with this powerful new technology to ensure that it benefits all working people and is not used to enrich corporate CEOs. And so we've the AFL-CIO and other unions participate in that effort. But really the best protection for working people is their union. And we need to have a voice in how this new technology is being used. And the best way to do that is through the freedom to organize and negotiate over how this new technology will be used. And so, in my book, the best way is to empower working people to be able to form unions. That's passage, of course, of the Protecting the Right to Organize, or PRO Act. And certainly we have a lot that needs to be done. And we have to remember, Washington will always be catching up to developments, right? And it's up to us as working people to come together through our unions to be able to push back on the use of artificial intelligence in ways that destroys jobs and increases economic inequality and enriches CEOs.
The report, the Executive Pay Watch report by the AFL-CIO, you can find that at paywatch.org. Last question on this: anything positive? What do we take from this? What do you want people to know? What do you want folks to get from this message?
So I would say that the most important thing is that how AI is used is a choice, and working people have the power to change the rules of the game to ensure that technology is used in a way that's fair and enriches our society and economy as a whole, and does not lead to incredible growth and wealth disparities, right? And I take inspiration from the SAG-AFTRA and Writers Guild strike. That this is over 100,000 workers who've said no, enough's enough. We need to have protections in how this new technology is being used. We need to have a voice in how it's being used. We're not opposed to artificial intelligence. We recognize that it has the power to make our jobs easier, to make workers more productive, to raise standards of living. But if we don't have a voice in how that technology is used, it'll just accrue to the CEOs. Yep. And on our Paywatch website, we profile the CEO pay of the companies that are make up the television and movie production companies. They make on average $35 million a year, including folks like Disney's Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, his employment contract now offers him $30 million a year. Just this summer, right before the performers went on strike, he said their demands were not realistic. Well, I got news for Bob Iger. His demands of his employees, they're not realistic. We're not going to defer to CEOs to implement artificial intelligence in ways that undermine our jobs and undermine the broad-based prosperity that this country was founded on.
There you go. No, I'm right there with you. Brendan, I appreciate you taking time. Great report. Hope folks will take a look at it. You can find it at paywatch.org, the executive Paywatch report by the FFL-CIO. Brendan Reese, appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, Rick.
Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, as I said, that Live Nation CEO, $139 million. And that money, honestly, it comes from you. It comes from you in the form of higher ticket prices. Every time you go to buy, and you don't have a choice anymore. This is the thing. The right loves to talk, oh, choice. You got choice. No, you don't. You got to go Live Nation or Ticketmaster. And then there are a bunch of other ones that kind of, feed off of that, but it's the same thing. At the end of the day, you're getting ripped off and lining someone like his pockets. It's angering. And just, this is what Biden's talking about, junk fees and all that. Here's a guy who's making a living off junk fees. Let's quick go to the phones. We got Steve in Chicago on line one. Steve, how are you, man?
Fine, thank you. And I think this is an important topic. On the one hand, we're living in a century where modern human beings, especially in the Western world, have got a lot of time in terms of doing something that they want, leisure time, and especially with regard to how they spend their entertainment dollar. Something that was unheard of 500, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. That a huge part of the economy, if you would have told somebody a couple of hundred years ago, would be dedicated exclusively to entertaining people. They would have thought you're crazy. How is that possible? But that's the reality of modern life in the Western world. And now this idea that, well, we can do this without paying anybody, because with artificial intelligence taken to its logical ends, you could create artificial entities that look like human beings playing characters. You can write scripts. You can do all of these things. And, in the same way that reality TV, and for people who don't know it, the reason that you have reality TV today is because in the late 1980s, there was a strike, and the networks needed to figure out a way to sort of fill that time. And they decided, well, hey, let's create, the reality television. And the same thing, and then that got accelerated 20 years later when there was another strike, and reality TV really took off. And, you don't have to pay them. The cast of Friends at the height of that show's success, that they were paying $20 million an episode just to the 6 major characters in order to put them on the screen per episode. Now, for a reality TV show, you advertise for that. You don't have to pay people anything. They will claw each other's hair out to be one of the people who stars on a reality TV show.
Yeah, just watch one of those reality shows. You're spot on.
Yeah, I mean, it's garbage, but people love it for some reason. And so, I mean, this is a way to circumvent that. You can actually give people dramas and comedies without screenwriters, without directors, without actual actors in the extreme, moving forward. But and there's this theory within economics, creative destruction, that that you do destroy things as society progresses and technology advances, but out of that comes something better because you create. So, and the argument that people like to use is, okay, well, we're not looking to resurrect the horse and buggy industry because we moved on into automobiles. Okay, that's a good point. But at the same time, we need to recognize that when technology is developed, it's not developed by these entities that are most likely to profit from them exclusively. A lot of this was developed using public dollars, universities, other places, and the idea that then it's going to be usurped, co-opted by the small group of corporate interests and people who will then capitalize upon it to the exclusion of everybody else is what we want to check. I'm not arguing against AI. I'm arguing against its misuse, in which it helps to concentrate resources and wealth and power in the hands of a few people. I think we can utilize it productively in terms of entertainment, but let's just be fair and sort of distribute its benefits among people. Let's not simply say, all right, well, there's going to be a handful of people who are going to be making all of the money, and the rest of us are going to be paying them to enjoy the entertainment that they produce, not thinking for a moment that who they put out of work.
No, you're spot on. And look, I'm not a Luddite yet. I don't say smash the machine. Like you, I think we need to distribute the profits from it. But you think about it, every major technological advancement for the past, a handful of people did really, really well, and all of the working people got screwed and took it on the chin. And my point is this should be that one time where maybe we don't.
Right. I mean, you and I both know that in the last 40 years, we doubled productivity in this country, and then we doubled it again. But is the average American living 3 and 4 times as well? No. Because what we did was we simply made sure that the people at the top got the benefits of that increase in productivity. Average Americans are working longer, and for most of them, they've lost ground. You have to work harder and longer, take fewer vacations, have less time with your children, less time off. And Americans don't even take their full allotment of vacations and days off because they're afraid they're going to miss out. Because God forbid that they should miss out at a day at work, because something can happen that might cost them an advancement down the road. And that's a shame. And then we need to start addressing this disparity. When a society moves forward because of the advances that we make technologically and otherwise, well, again, I'm not a socialist. I'm for people being able to become billionaires. But you know what? As we move up that scale in terms of profit, you get to pay more, just like we did in the 1950s when we actually said that up to 92% we're going to pay if you make huge sums of money. And that was supposedly the golden age of the American economy.
Yeah. No, the point of the 92% tax rate, and this is where my mind is I don't think anyone's worth $1 billion. Sorry. I just don't. But I get your point. Real quick, I got about 45 seconds. How do you think you get that message out to average everyday working people? Because individually, when I have conversations with people, they get what you just said, all of that. But in groups, not so much. How do you think that gets out then?
Well, honestly, it's because of this sort of misbegotten narrative that it continues to permeate America and American history in the way in which we perceive wealth. We tend to think of people who make a great deal of money as some usually lone guy who went out there and created the better mousetrap and then became a billionaire, be it Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or Elon Musk or whatnot, Jeff Bezos. We need to get across to people, young people and adults, that none of that was possible without the infrastructure, without the educational institutions, without the regulatory system in America that makes this a great place to do business. and ensures those people can make all that money. So guess what? They didn't do it on their own, unlike the narrative that you've been taught.
Yeah.
So let's ask them to pay a little bit more, given they're benefiting from the things
There
that
you go.
taxpayers
Appreciate
provided.
Appreciate it, Steve.
In order to get.
Thanks, buddy. Quick break. Right back.
Is labor history in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1890. That was the day that one of the heroines of the U.S. labor movement, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, was born in Concord, New Hampshire. Elizabeth learned her progressive politics at a young age. Her father was a socialist and her mother a feminist. Elizabeth was kicked out of high school for speaking out in favor of socialism. This did not slow her down. She kept speaking and her reputation grew. She became a member of the Industrial Workers of the World. She traveled the country organizing and speaking to workers. From the Minnesota Iron Range to the textile mills of Lawrence, Massachusetts, Elizabeth was on the front lines of the labor struggle. She was arrested for her activity 10 times, but was never sentenced. During World War I, Flynn was arrested and stood trial for speaking out against the war. The experience led her to become one of the founders of the American Civil Liberties Union, an organization dedicated to protecting freedom of speech. In the 1930s, Flynn became a member of the U.S. Communist Party, writing a regular column for the Daily Worker. But despite her personal political ideas, she supported Democratic Party President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1944. During the 1950s, she was caught up in the anti-communist hysteria led by Senator Joe McCarthy. She went to prison for 2 years for allegedly violating the Smith Act, a law against overthrowing the government. She died while on a visit to Russia in 1964. More than 20,000 people attended her funeral there. A monument to Flynn stands at the Forest Home Cemetery just outside of Chicago, where she is buried alongside the graves of Eugene Dennis, Big Bill Haywood, and the Haymarket Martyrs. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
How about a little bit of good news for a change? Specifically, good news about news. The demise of local newspapers has been a very depressing story in the last few years, with several thousand of them gobbled up by Wall Street profiteers. Those money powers loot the publication's assets, then callously shut down each community's paper or reduces them to empty news shells. So that's that. Local print journalism is passé, right? Wrong. High-spirited, community-minded subscribers in places like Glen Rose, Texas, Hamburg, Iowa, Portland, Maine, and International Falls, Minnesota, are humming an upbeat tune of regeneration that could be titled, Not Dead Yet. In Maine, for example, 5 of the state's 6 daily papers and 17 weeklies were sinking under the ownership of an investment group. But all were recently bought by the National Trust for Local News, a nonprofit started 2 years ago. The trust is turning each publication over to local nonprofit owners and helping them find ways to become sustainable. Another new effort called Cherry Road Media has bought 77 rural papers in 17 states, most from the predatory Gannett conglomerate that wanted to dump them. Cherry Road's business plan is simple, old-time genius. Return editorial decision-making to local people and journalists who know the town. Be an active presence and participant in community affairs. Make the locals responsible for sustaining their town's paper and, most important, reinvest profits in real local journalism that advances democracy. This is Jim Hightower saying, in both of these new initiatives, the foremost mission is to serve the common good of the communities, not to pad the wealth of a few distant financiers. To learn more about these models and how you might implement something similar in your town, contact Institute for Rural Journalism, ruraljournalism.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So no, we don't need the Voting Rights Act. No, don't need any of that. Because those states that you would in the past would have had to get pre-clearance, they've learned. They would never do anything like make 161 voting precinct changes since November of 2022. No, they would never do that, except in Mississippi where they did just that. and evidently leaving fewer precincts statewide and moving dozens of them. Just shuffling stuff around. No big deal. Now I look at Ohio. Ohio, my former home state. Evidently, the election officials there doing some shuffling around in Cuyahoga and Summit counties. Cuyahoga is where I lived in Cleveland, and when I saw this, I didn't have to read the article to know exactly where they moved the voting precincts. Most of them on the east side, where all the poor working class black people live. Yeah, never. But hey, nothing to see. Move along. Now they did move a couple in suburban areas, but the mass of the people affected gonna be on the east side. But Tuesday, big election in Ohio, and here to share some thoughts on that debacle, I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob's a former Ohio congressman and political analyst. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So any shock that they're moving precincts around in the Cleveland area?
No, because my friend, the late Senator Pat Sweeney, he used to say years ago that, the election's not over with till St. Mary's reports. And St. Mary's was the cemetery. He used to joke. So,
okay.
Yeah. But in Cuyahoga, it's like, it's always a rough and tumble county, as you know. And it's a county that there are so many high stakes for votes. And, of course, what they've done, there's more than 47,000 voters being affected by those changes to 50 voting precincts in Cleveland, I think East Cleveland, Seven Hills, Shaker Heights, South Euclid, et cetera. And a lot of the polling places, I think, are in schools, aren't they, Rick?
Yeah.
Most of them. And they're saying that the changes were the result of consolidation, is what the Secretary of State.
Yeah, of course. You do that 5 days before an election.
Well, here's the other thing. If it is because of consolidation, there are other buildings, churches that are down the street from the schools that will gladly let their facilities be used. So if there were consolidations in those, 8 or 9 burgs there of Cleveland, why would you not then say, okay, well, we're going to go down the block from the school that used to be there. It's not there anymore due to consolidation. We'll go down the block to the church, 1 block away.
Yeah, but 5 days, Bob? 5 days?
I mean, they didn't do that. They're just moving them where they want. I mean, they don't even make a rational argument by saying, well, consolidation caused this to uproot 47,000 voters. It's consolidation of schools. And yes, they do it within 5 days of the, of the whole process going down. I mean, it's just absolutely bizarre. Of course, I think they're going to get their lunch handed to them on issue 1. I really do.
I hope so.
What's that?
I really hope so. I mean, I'm at the point where the voters of Ohio have got to see what's going on as, and maybe you'll agree or disagree with me. I look at what Republicans are doing in that state as potentially the last throes of power and going, we're just going to consolidate so much that there's no way we can be held accountable down the road. Because honestly, I mean, they've done, we had a representative from Iowa recently, just in the last hour, talking about what's happening and all the horrible policies that are going on there. And Ohio's Iowa on steroids at this moment. The voters at some point have got to revolt when lives don't get better, don't you think? And there's part of me that goes, this is their attempt to insulate themselves from being held accountable down the road.
Right. I mean, Tom Suttis, who was of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, I've known Tom forever and a day, just did a very interesting editorial today, which is right along the lines of what you just said. And Tom's always been, a straight shooter on Ohio, but he exactly mimics what you said, because here's the thing, back in 1985, we went in the state Senate from 1716 Democrat. It was a Democrat-controlled state. Dick Celeste governor. We went from 1716
in Democrat control of the Ohio Senate, and I ran that year, and we flipped to 18-15, right? With the change in the state government, though, there was a working relationship. You had Vern Reif was Speaker in the House, Democrat controlled. You had Dick Celeste as governor. Long later after that came Voinovich, from Cleveland. And the bottom line to all this is that it remained a pretty decent give and take state, pretty decent, in a sense of making things work, right? And then along came, of course, Kasich et al., and then the state Senate, went from 1815 to unrecognizable, with a small amount of Democrats, and then the House. And then this whole power grab madness started, and I think it completely hits a pinnacle, Rick, with issue 1, because first of all, the Republicans said that they weren't going to have special elections. What did they just do? Special election.
Yeah.
And then they want to change it. And the people, isn't that funny that the guy from Illinois that just put $4 million in, he's from Illinois, he must really care about the Ohio Constitution, He's from Illinois.
Yeah.
So he cares about Ohio. Maybe he thinks Illinois is going to annex Ohio. And you have this outrageous 60% of the vote, which if you look at the history of Ohio and some major issues of rights to vote, and other issues that have passed, they would never have made it with this. So they're trying to rig the power and then throw in the AE or the First Energy scandal. And I just don't know how long people are going to put up. One-party rule without paying attention, to the people can eventually, I assume, go under.
Yeah, but then again, look, I've been looking at this whole Trump thing, going at what point do voters walk away from Trump because, he did what he's accused of and he's admitted to doing it. How do you get people to, to completely, walk away from that?
Well, there's the problem it's the primary because, like I said, I don't care. Yes, if he's convicted of something prior to the Republican National Convention, he's going to lose some votes, small s, some votes. He is still going to have the percentage to win the Republican National Convention. The only thing that stops that is if he decides to not be in the Republican National Convention because privately he's convinced he can't win. Now, I'm not going to say he can't win the general because politics is so bizarre these days. You got to wait till the very end to make a call.
Yeah, no, you hit a recession, all cards, all bets are off.
Yeah, it's off. And he could have my old bed in Morgantown Federal Corrections running the country. Who knows? So, but as far as Trump himself, if convicted, he will lose some votes, but he still will have the percentage he needs. Now, with all these Republicans in there, it's not a great percentage. It's under 50%, but he still got it.
Yeah, but I look at Ohio again. It comes back down to the gerrymandering. They got away with, again, using maps that even the Ohio Supreme Court shot down a number of times. It's like no rules apply to them, and no one holds them. This is my problem with this, that there doesn't seem to be any deference for the rule of law. It's my team. The ends justify the means if my team wins.
Well, look what they did. It used to be with the Supreme Court. I was there. I went through redistricting. I was a state legislator involved in redistricting. And, if we sent something in the court in Ohio said no to us, guess what? We came back and then punted. What did they do when the court said no to them in Ohio? They sent the same thing back.
Yep.
Literally the same thing. They didn't even bother to change a dot.
It just, again, it shows that they know that the voters aren't going to hold them accountable. And this is where my fear level is that there is no accountability for an out-of-control party hell-bent on power and control.
So, like I said, when it started out, and the Republicans picked up a few seats, and I know this can happen with either party, I understand that, but when they picked up a few seats, there was still such a balance, and things got done. And then just over periods of time, the more seats they got, the more callous it got. But I think this hits the epitome, the peak
I should say, of arrogance that I've seen in my state in my modern lifetime here.
Yeah, sadly, it seems to be. It seems to be
especially doing a special election to negate the November vote before it happens.
Isn't that amazing? And why isn't that the top story in our news media? Why haven't we heard more of this?
Well, I've told people that, countless people have asked me, and I said, look, this is about the legislature trying to stop a vote they think is going to happen on the abortion issue in November. That's what this is about. Now, I've told people, if you 100% believe in, right to life's position, or if this was about guns and they were trying to, if you 100% believe in Second Amendment gun issues, you still have to look at the future of the state, and this is not the way to do it, to make a 60%. It's just not the way to do it. It's not good the Senate does this. This is an abomination in the Senate, and it's an abomination here. And you have former, Republican governors. You have former Republican attorney generals that have, thank goodness, come out against this and said, wait a minute, this is not the right thing to do for the state, no matter what you think about the abortion issue. This was designed to stop a November vote. This is exactly what this was.
Yeah, I would have been surprised if they just say no. This will only apply for anything that happens in November of 2023, because this again is another one of these arguments that I make of why we should be taxing billionaires, why we shouldn't have billionaires. Because you said a moment ago the huge amount of money came from an out-of-state billionaire, and I would love to see Illinois annex Ohio, because I never liked Indiana anyway. But this is another one of these things. Who was calling for this? Where's the 50% of people in the state petitioning for this? Where's that groundswell of support that was? If you're going to talk about participatory democracy, where's that at? From what I understand, it's just a couple of billionaires who've spent a whole bunch of money.
Well, it is just because of their philosophy, and again, out of state people deciding that the Ohio Constitution isn't crafted well enough, and overall, when you look at how the legislature did this, again, they defied everything. They said they weren't going to do special elections. The people have a vote. And I pointed to the Senate because, the Senate has some idiotic rules, the U.S. Senate I'm talking about. Idiotic rules. Yeah. I mean, the 60%, that's created by the Senate. The one vote, look what's going on with the Pentagon now. One senator can hold up the entire system. Oh, they have to yield to him. They don't dare make anybody angry. These are crafted devices for people that were in power to get certain results. That's the way the U.S. Senate was crafted. That's the way the Ohio legislators crafted this issue coming up here.
Yeah, it's angering. As a voter, and as someone who cares about democracy, it's angering. And I'm hoping on Tuesday, the voters of Ohio go to the polls and show their anger. So the question is, let's say this goes down 60-40. Do the Republicans in the House and Senate in Ohio, do they care?
Well, they're not going to care until it's made an issue, until somebody, you have these people that have these, super PACs. And you've got them on the Democratic side, you've got them on the Republican side. Until people get together and decide, we're going to push these points, and we're going to make the ads necessary to bring these points to the forefront. Otherwise, the issue goes down. The legislators won't like it, but nobody's going to say, "Look what you guys tried to do," because nobody's going to, do that drumbeat of a message out there. It's all, as you know, it's messaging. That's what it is.
Yeah. So again, I come back to how do the Democrats learn from this? Because I was just reading a report that said Biden's losing support with Black and Latino working class voters. And I'm going, how's that possible? We're lowest unemployment, wages are going up, inflation's coming down, we're building factories all across this country. Things economically seem to be pointing in the right direction. Look, there are problems, but we seem to be going in a good direction. How can you be losing support among groups that are historically now at historic low unemployment numbers? How's that possible?
Black and Latinos. Well, look at this one, Rick. This one blew my mind today. Most Americans in a new poll say they disapprove of President Biden's handling of climate change. And in the new poll, and this is Washington Post, not Fox News, University of Maryland poll, 57% of Americans surveyed said they disapproved of Biden's handling of climate change, while only 27% said they have read or heard anything, basically, a great deal about the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, if this was 75% of the people think that climate change is nonsense, right? That's not what this polling's saying. This polling's saying people that care about the climate are like, well, I don't know what he's done.
Have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Yes.
Man, we're living that.
Yeah. This article today blew my mind. Of all the issues, it just absolutely blew my mind.
I don't know what it is, but I'm against
it. It's amazing.
Oh, gosh, help me. Oh, this is just, but I guess predictable, right? I mean, this is where we are as a country.
Well,
we
I guess
red hats, blue hats.
Maybe they just need to, get everything on TikTok. I don't know what works these days, but that polling, again, if this was just a bunch of people saying, oh, this is nonsense, it's not. But they have no idea what's in the bill, or no idea that he's basically even done a bill.
Yeah. So what those 57% is, and now that my mind's wrapping around it, I'm still struggling with the people who don't know anything about it. It's anyone who would vote for Trump, 35%, maybe 40%, and then it's the people on the far extreme of the climate where we should shut everything down, who's saying no, he's not doing enough. He's doing something, but it's not nearly enough. As my mind's going, I can almost see it. To a degree, I think maybe I can put that math together.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's look at real quick here, individual part of the polling. The solar panel tax credits have the support of 65% of everyone polled, all right? Now, only 15% were opposed. The rest of them didn't know, right?
Right.
Electric vehicle tax credits had the support of 50%, with only 22% opposed, and then 26% they don't know. Even fewer respondents had heard or read about tax credits or tax credits to buy heat pumps, or on and on and on. And you look at this and you just wonder, how you get that message out there.
Yeah, no, you do what the right does. You saturate everything with people, out there, telling the stories. Like I've been talking about about most of that stuff over the last couple of years. At one point or another, I've brought it up. Wow, it's quite remarkable where we are.
Amazing.
But I got to tell you, the more I think about it, the movie Idiocracy missed the mark, because we're living a much scarier and funnier version. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, we are in a weird world.
Yes, sir. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. I got to tell you, if you haven't seen Idiocracy, and I don't promote very much, at least the first 5 minutes, you got to watch at least that, and then you know kind of where we are. Quick break, right back.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. In the early 1980s, telephone service in the United States went through a major shakeup. Up until that time, AT&T, through their Bell operating companies, monopolized almost all of the telephone service in the nation. 150 million phones were part of the Bell network. A federal antitrust lawsuit had wound its way through the courts and was reaching a conclusion. Ma Bell saw the handwriting on the wall that they would lose the suit and moved to reach a settlement to break the company up. Into that restructuring chaos, the workers at Bell sat down to negotiate a new contract. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1983. 675,000 workers walked off the job. It was one of the largest strikes in United States history. The strikers were members of the Communication Workers of America, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and the Telecommunications International Union. They wanted improved wages, more funding for health care, and improved employee training. The strike lasted for 22 days. Scabs and managers attempt to keep the system going, but those who called in for information often had long wait times. Finally, management agreed to meet the union's demands. It was the last time the CWA sat across the negotiating table from Ma Bell. The company's breakup occurred just a few months later. With the breakup came a slow eroding of the number of unionized employees. 55% of the Bell employees belonged to unions in 1983. Just 15 years later, that number had fallen by half to 27%. The changing technology of cell phones, overseas outsourcing, and the emergence of new companies have made this workforce an important front for today's labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So, America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Evidently, Rudy's in some financial troubles. Turns out he's going to be putting up his New York apartment up for sale. Listed the Upper East Side, little place where he lives, $6.5 million. Now, the report is not sure why Rudy's selling. I guess he's owned it for several decades. But, I'm thinking legal fees are chewing up a lot of his disposable income. You can only get so much money from the Mujahideen Khalq and from all kind of other questionable groups. If you're going to be friends with Trump, you're probably going to need a lawyer at some point, because clearly he's not going to pony up anything. Now, what's interesting, we were talking about polling a second ago, and New York YouGov CBS News poll shows that 59% of Americans think that what's going on with Trump is about stopping him from seeking re-election. I don't see that at all, because I think most Democrats, at least most that I know, they want Trump. They want to be able to beat Trump because he's not getting new voters. I don't see him generating new votes. I see him only losing votes, especially as more comes out about the things that he's done and the things that he says. This is a great narrative. It's about him. I don't think it is. I think it's about the reality. He caused this on himself. As I said earlier, the documents case would have never been brought against any president unless they did exactly what Trump did. When the records folks come and say, hey, we'd like our stuff back, please. And then the enforcement arm comes and said, hey, you got that stuff? And you lie about it, and you have people move it around, and you hide it, and you brag about having it. You put them in a position where they have no choice. All of this has been about having no choice. Trump gave no one an off-road. There's no off-ramp in any of this because he doesn't allow it. Now, part of me thinks maybe this is the attention he wants and seeks and needs,
because he thinks this is going to get him new voters. I don't know. I got to hope there are decent Republicans out there. I got to hope there are Republicans who are going, no, this isn't the country we want. And I got to hope in Ohio there are Republicans going, this power grab too far. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you back here next time.
The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.